Okay, you guys, this is kind of one of the neater tutorials. I really like this process. I'm creating a bulkhead by not hand placing it, but instead using Blender to create it for me. And what it's doing is it's following my outer mesh, my CourseForge mesh, and it's following the undulation of that as well. And so you'll see that it actually kind of even curves up here. And we're going to do that in a two-step process. It's really neat. I promise you, if you follow this through, you can get it. But there's two parts to it. One is creating a repeatable part, and then two is getting the information out of your CourseForge terrain into Blender so that it can follow along a line. And it's a really neat process. Just to show you in Blender, what I created for my Kiowa wall is a solid structure here that I use as my repeating unit. We'll create one in Blender that's just going to be a block, just to give you an idea, but you could create something similar to this that could be repeatable. And in the end, you kind of see how I've done this as well. You can simplify some of your texturing or your creation by having I have a square here that ends up having a texture on it that makes it look like a bunch of individual panels. And so in the end, however you can do it, you could even import some stones or something like that, and then we're going to use that for our bulkhead creation. So first thing we need to do is get our terrain information off this mesh. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to go to the asset store and download this free asset, and it's called Scene OBJ Exporter. When you download that, it's going to bring it into your CourseForge, your project panel, and it's going to be OBJ export. I promise you this will not mess up CourseForge in any way, and you don't have to delete it before building. In your file section, you're going to notice a new tab called Export and Wavefront OBJ. So that's all it really brings in for you. And I'll show you how we do that or use it. So you've got your mesh created. Now all I've got here, honestly, I'm going to turn on my CourseForge, is I just have an outer mesh. And in the end, obviously, this is 17 at Kiowa. You'll have all your other meshes. You'll have your green and your bunkers and whatnot. But you're going to pick your outer mesh. Make sure you've watched K11's Bulkhead 101 for how to deal with the mesh and how to deal with the terrain lowering. But now what you're going to want to do is actually see if we can select this mesh and get it out of here. The way we're going to do that is you're going to go ahead and pick your terrain level or layer. So in your hierarchy, you can pick terrain, or you can do the selection tool and pick the terrain here, and then go to your inspector and go all the way to the bottom of the terrain inspector, and you're going to see course script and turn debug on. So I'm sure some of you have done this before, obviously. What that allows us now to do is pick the spline. That outer mesh is spline 37 here. And now I've got it, and now with our new free asset, File, Export, Wavefront, OBJ, you're gonna come up here and you're gonna tick Only Selected Objects. You're gonna untick Apply Position, and you'll see that brings it into the center of our Blender. If we don't untick Apply Position, it goes way off in the global space, and you won't know where your object is. But untick Apply Position, untick Generate Materials, and Export Textures. You can leave split objects alone, and then export. And then I'm going to save this. I'm calling this one 17 test. And then you're going to see when we bring it into Blender here, my Blender panel, hopefully you guys have played with this before and have your setup the way you like. Just one thing of note, if you haven't done Blender before, go File, User Preferences, change your input to select with left mouse, and then do Save User Settings. And then that way, you're selecting the same way I am with left mouse click. In the end, if you don't have this panel on the right, you can get that from up here in the top right hand corner. There's a triangle. If you drag it to the left and then come down here where next to the word view in the second window you've created, I change that to my UV image editor. And then you've also probably got a cube and a light and a camera. I actually go and pick all those here on this over here, sort of with the words, and then hit X to delete them. And then once everything's deleted and this is cleaned up, this is how I always come into Blender. If you go File, Save Startup File, This is how Blender will be when you come in here every time. It'll be all cleaned up and you don't have to do that all the time, delete the cube and whatnot. If you like it, you can leave it. Anyway, let's bring that. We go File, Import, Wavefront OBJ. Okay? And we're going to import that spline we just made and exported from Unity. Now you see it's here. If you go to wireframe view here, so viewport shading, wireframe, you're going to see that's the same mesh for hole 17. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick it and it's going to highlight it from that sort of red-orange to this yellow-orange. So now I know it's selected. I did that with my left mouse. I hit Tab, and now I know I'm in edit mode here. See how it says edit mode? And then I'm going to hit A to deselect it. And then this is a neat trick here. You're going to pick this edge select. So you're on vertex select, change it to edge select. Hold down the Alt button and click the outermost edge while holding down Alt and left mouse. What that does is it ring selects all the edges around versus you having to go hand pick them all. And it will only do that with sort of a perfect ring. So you can come in and do some other ones. You can see where I picked that as well. Tab to get back out of that. See, it won't do some of these. But anyway, pick the outermost one because that's what our fence is going to follow, or our bulkhead. Now hit P as in Paul, and then choose the word selection. What this is doing is it's separating those edges from the rest of the mesh. And when we do it, you're going to see you've got now a second layer created here. So this 0.001 is just our outer edges. And so I'm going to select the old spline, spline 37, X, and delete it. So now all I've got is those edges. So now I'm here in object mode. I'm going to A to deselect it. Now let's create our object that we're going to use to go around that curve. And so you guys know how to make objects, or you could even import a simple object, make sure it's kind of lower poly. But I'm going to do Shift A here, and we're going to just put a cube in. Let's go back to solid view. Alright, so now you've got your cube. We're going to make it just more wall-like. And so it's 2 by 2. If I hit Tab, I'm into edit mode. I'm going to hit SX, and I'm going to just cut it in half, and then SX, and then 0.5 again. So that was SX 0.5, enter, SX 0.5, enter. And now it's a half a meter wide. And now I'm going to go GZ1. And all that did was bring this to the ground level. So now I've got my wall that I want to be repeated. And now you can make this as decorative as you want. Put something on the top of it, put something on the side of it. But then you would only put it on just one side, just like I did with my bulkhead, if you remember that. And you'll see, because it's going to repeat, and you just want it to be confluent when it repeats. So let's just texture this here. I'm going to just do this just in case you haven't seen some of this before. But we're going to click the marble here, and that's the material. We're going to click the plus sign, the word new, and then we're going to just call this stone, and then hit enter. So now we have a new material here, and then we're going to click the checkerboard next to it, and that's going to add our texture to it. We're going to click the word new, scroll down, click the word open, and then we're going to find our texture here. And I'm doing this here for Ola. He wanted my medieval texture that I have in my house builder, and you can download anything you want from Google CG Textures. We're going to bring this stone in. Now it doesn't show up here right away, so you got to come down here on the left panel and choose it here. Alright, so now it's there. Now we just need to unwrap this. So you could hit U to unwrap. The whole thing's selected. And then now let's go back into texture view. In doing that though, it kind of squashes these. So we want it to be a more uniform unwrap. If it's a box, you're going to have to mark some seams here. And so the way you do that is you think of this like scissors, and this is always a little tough to get accustomed to, and I screwed up sometimes. But if you go to edge select and pick edges, and you're just doing shift left mouse, and think of it like scissors cutting this around, and then you're going to lay this whole object flat. And so right now this wouldn't be able to lay flat, so you gotta pick that edge there. And so this is kind of the fussy part. Unwrapping is always the pain for everyone. All right, now we've got our edges all selected, and I'm going to hit Control E, mark scene. And now you can see it's going to mark them in red. And so A to select the whole thing, and then U to unwrap. And now you'll see that it's done a much cleaner job on the ends. If I select it over here with A, you can see I've got a large square where I have the larger square and then the ends. And then if that works where the shapes are correct, or the shapes are all the same size, sorry, because that happens sometimes, tab to go out of here, and now you're in object mode with the wall selected. Do object, apply, rotation, and scale. You only need to do that if all these unwraps were the same size. It happens sometimes, I don't always know why. I think it has to do with how I've scaled it. Sometimes if you screwed up scaling, it will do that. Then you just re-unwrap it. Anyway, this is a tileable texture, so I can just go out to infinity and not really care that it goes outside the bounds there. All right, so now let's get this wall piece to repeat around this line. And we're going to do that by going back to the line here. So tab to get out of edit mode, A to deselect this. And now let's pick the line. And we're going to turn this line into a curve. Right now, if you see here, that's got this triangle shape, which means it's a mesh. If I hit Alt-C, I get this convert to and choose convert to curve from mesh text. And now you'll see it's got that curve. Okay, deselect it with A and go back and left mouse select your wall. And then you're going to come up here to the wrench. Okay, so your wall is selected, mine says cube, and pick the wrench. And your add modifier is going to be the word array. Now what you're going to see, it says fixed count 2. So it's repeated my wall twice. If I change it to fit curve, and then I choose this box and choose spline 37, now it's following my curve. But it's stacking it in the wrong direction for me. It's stacking along the X. And so we're going to change this at 0 here in the X. So relative offset at 0 for the X, and then change the Y to 1. And that's going to set it off exactly by one wall piece. Okay. Now if you see if I did 1.2 here, you're going to see create some separation. And you may want that. You know, it just depends on what you're going for. But for this tutorial, let's make our Y offset to be relative offset to be 1. Okay? Now you see it's trying to create the length of the curve, but it's not following the curve. And so now we're going to get it to follow the curve by adding one more modifier. So you're not going to do anything. You're not going to apply this one. Just let it be. And then you're going to go add modifier, curve. And then come all the way to the bottom of that. And there's a word that says object down here. Pick spline 37. And then you're going to keep choosing around on this. The deformation axis, you just kind of have to keep playing with it until it's exactly what you want. And now you'll see it's deforming that block all along my curve. Now this one doesn't look great. I mean, you could do a better job. Now you can also go back to the cube out of the modifier. So if I hit tab, I'm back in edit mode. And if I hit A to select the whole thing, you could mess around with it just to see, you know, if you don't like your scaling, maybe we get it so that the bigger square falls exactly on it. You know, you'll have to mess with how you want it to look. The other thing is, that's why I've got you've got something to block this. If you put another structure here, you know, maybe put a pillar here, it would block it. But I think you get the idea. So then tab goes back to our array. So our array and curve modifier we've got here is creating that whole wall for us. Now you're going to say, well, I don't want it all the way around the hole. I just want it at some part. So at this point, save your file. So go File, Save As, and name it whatever you want. And the reason I'm recommending that you save it now is because we're going to apply these modifiers. And if you ever want to edit, you can't go back and do it as easily. So what we're going to do now is we're going to apply our modifiers. And you come to the top of the stack, the word array, and there's apply. Click apply. Then now you just have the word curve, click apply. So now that's set in those array changes. And now if we tab into edit mode, we've got the entire wall built. So what I'm going to do is hit 5 and then 7. That put me in ortho mode. 7 put me in top. A to deselect it. And then I'm going to go ahead and see this here, this limit selection to visible. You want to make sure, let me zoom in to show you, when you select pieces to delete, here's what I'm going to do, that it picks everything. It picks the wall on the backside. See how it didn't pick the wall on the backside there? Just make sure this is clicked in. So I guess it's white there. You want it to be white. So 7 to go from above view. And then you're going to see B is box select, and then B again here. And I'm just going to pick off some of this, and then X to delete, and X choose vertices. So what I've done is I basically just chopped off some of my wall. And then you'll have to come into your ends and make sure that that's what you want. You know, that's actually a whole piece of a wall. And you'll see it deform some pieces of the wall, and you just got to accept it, that it's made your life easier, and some pieces look a little odd. But it's a heck of a lot easier than hand placing all this. But so we still need to get some of this off. And so I'm going to go into face select and just delete off some of this. And then B to box select that. Go into vertex select mode, B, and then X. All right. So now we've got our fence, or our bulkhead. And you can see how it's following the contours there. And let's bring this back into Unity. So you're going to get Tab, and now I'm into object mode, and I've got it A to deselect. Just make sure your wall is the only thing selected, and then I'm going to go File, Export, FBX. I'm going to tick these boxes, Selected Objects, Experimental, Apply, Transform, and I'm just going to name this Test 17. So just selected objects, experimental, apply, transform, those boxes are checked, and then I typed in my name, export FBX here on the top right. We're going to go into Unity, and we're just going to do this in my bulkheads folder, import new asset, test 17 FBX, import that. I come up here and you can generate a collider on it, so tick generate colliders. I change this from models material, so it's that stone word. Click apply, and then I don't know why, but I go to animations and untick import animation as well. Click apply. So now if we drag this in, there's our wall. Now let's go create our material for it. So here's our stone. We just need to import that our texture for it. Oh. And then I'm going to change this to legacy shaders. You would do bump, diffuse, create yourself a normal and all that. But in the end, now you can see we've got our wall. And now you're going to follow K11's instructions on placement of all this. But you're going to want to get it exactly where you want it to be. You don't want any of your outer mesh sticking through it. You know, so it'll take a little bit of fiddling. Get it exactly where you want it. But I think that's pretty cool in short order to be able to build a bulkhead that follows your terrain. You can go around T's with this as well. You know, I have a couple holes where I go around the T box. You can do this to plant objects. You could put flowers on it. You know, if you wanted your flowers to follow a line, you could, any object really, parking cars on your parking lot, whatever. But this is how to get something out of CourseForge and to follow your mesh. And hope you enjoy that.